one minute everything was great. It was my birthday. We're going to go on the boat. Everything was great. Now,
Your life just changed in an instant. I just fell to my knees and I just really felt the Holy Spirit speaking to my heart. Get up and go forgive your husband. And I get up, I was obedient and got up and went over and just wrapped my arms around him and was like, I forgive you because I know he would never harm our children.
there's such power in forgiveness.
Our son, Amos Luke, was born November 9th, 2004. He was our second son. He was actually the only child we actually planned for out of all four.
Mm.
Um, he just was one of those little guys that had an old soul. And I mean, of course, he was like a little toddler and enjoyed all those kinds of things. But there's something about Amos, and honestly, he was just really a mama's boy
Mhm.
Mm.
in a lot of ways.
Oh.
Capri would volunteer at a crisis pregnancy center, and our older son Elijah was home, and I would watch Elijah and Amos, and there was nothing you could do to console him. He would always go to the door and cry for mama. Always wanted to
Oh.
be. It got to the point where he would just always, you'd go over and pick him up and try to console him and try to distract him,
Yeah.
but he would always go back right to the door and cry for mama every night, it seemed like. And you go to church, you'd always hear him in the nursery
Yeah,
crying.
be
We
the
didn't get through a single church service without having to go to the nursery to go
yeah,
get Amos. So he was
yeah.
definitely a little
Yeah,
mama's boy.
those are all like real special gifts now, obviously down the road. But
Yeah.
he and his brother had a pretty sweet relationship, and they're 3 years apart. And Eli loved to dress up like Batman, and then we had a little Robin costume, so he would dress Amos up as Robin, and they were like, a little duo. And so that's really affected Eli losing his brother. But again, it's just on that note that he's just a little toddler. He loved balls, he loved tractors, he loved all the boy things. And
Mhm.
He was the only kid of our children that Capri said was planned. He was the only one that had brown eyes. All
yeah,
of our other children have beautiful
blue
blue
eyes,
eyes like Capri, but he had these brown eyes.
dark brown eyes.
Mhm. On May 29th, 2006, it was a beautiful day. Um, we live in Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay, and we have a boat. And my brother, who's my twin brother, called me and said, "Hey, let's take the families out on the boat today and go spend a day on the water." And great idea, let's do that. But we had some chores to take care of
Yeah,
around the house. We had recently just planted a garden, and we still need to finish doing that. And we had a few other things to do that day before we could go out on the boat.
yeah.
So
So why he explains it, it was a beautiful day. But as for Mama with toddlers, it was just very hectic. And I knew we were going out on the boat, and I knew I had to get all the things done and prepare all the stuff to take. And we had just been out on the boat recently, so I knew we were going to have to take with us. But I decided that we would go ahead and get the boys settled, and I needed to run up to the store. So I grabbed them up and we ran up to the store. And Amos wasn't overly affectionate as a toddler. Of course, he loved to snuggle, but We went to the deli and I had ordered some lunch meat. And as we're sitting there, he just starts kissing me like over and over again, which was kind of unusual for him. But I just embraced it because it was just precious. It's a little stage that I hadn't experienced yet. We came back home and he absolutely needed to take a nap. So I laid him down for his nap, and Eli went and did some playing, and I just went outside and started to weed and do some stuff, getting ready for the garden, and went back up, had woken him up, and I just really felt like it was so hot that day. I just grabbed some popsicles, and it wasn't normal for me just to plop down with him on the couch necessarily because we're so busy, but I really felt I needed to do that. I just kind of wanted to snuggle with him, so he sat there and ate his little popsicle, and of course now that's just so precious in that time. And we get up, we walk out, and of course you can't walk by, the tractor without getting on it. So with the boys, so they jumped on the tractor, and I guess we should really explain the dynamics of our house
Sure.
so that you can get a better idea of.
So we lived on a farm that had a driveway that came up and would wrap up to our house that sat on this hill, and then down at the bottom of the hill by the driveway was our garden, and just beyond that we had pasture and a barn, and we would have horses in our pasture. Typically there were, but you could, there was a hill in the pasture. They could be anywhere in the field. So that's kind of how the layout was. We would have on our house, we would have a front door that you never used,
Yeah.
and everybody used the back door. Um, and we had a little playground right there by the garden and the driveway
Yeah.
as well.
So as the boys get off, we start walking down that little hill towards the garden, and um, I could see Eli. He ran right to the play yard, and he's walking down the hill, and I just turned around, and I'm probably 20 feet away from him, but I look at him and I see him looking into the pasture, and he had this mesmerized look on his face, but it was so sweet. It looked so beautiful, and I'm like, what in the world is he looking at? And I look over to see if he's seeing the horses or any animals out there, and there was nothing. And I thought, that's so weird, but it was beautiful. As a mom, you're just like, okay, well, we need to get things done. So I saw him come down, and I could hear him playing on the swing set and the playhouse, and I'm just going to town on the garden and just trying to get things done. And I was like, you know what, we really need to water this garden before we go. It was I felt like I needed to get it done. So I had asked Arlo if we could get an extension for our hose. So I had some plants that I couldn't reach.
So part of our property too adjoins my parents' property, the larger part of the farm. And down there we had a bunch of hoses and stuff. So I drove the car down and loaded up some extra hose so we could reach the garden with it. And like I said before, our driveway's right beside the garden. So I pulled up and parked the car right there and hooked up the hose.
And you're saying it's an SUV.
Yeah.
So um, go ahead.
So anyways, we hooked up the hoses and watered the garden, and we kind of wrapped things up, and it was time to get ready to go out on the boat. And so Capri was heading up to the house to
Yeah.
clean up from, gardening, and she had Elijah behind him. And I looked up and I thought I saw Amos there. So I hop in the car to pull the car up, and I pull forward and I feel a bump. It's like, there's not a pothole in the driveway. And I get out of the car. And I walk up front, and there's my baby boy. So I scooped him up. I run up the hill. I'm just screaming, call 911, call 911.
And of course I hear him yelling this, and I just thought, oh, Arlo must have hurt himself. It's my mind went to. So I get on the phone, and the dispatcher's asking me what's going on. I say I have no idea. So I run out the front door. And I run down the hill, and Eli's in tow, and I'm just looking. I see nothing. I see the SUV. I just don't see Arlo and Amos. And I turn around, and she's asking me, can you please tell me what's happening? I said, I can't. I don't see anything. As soon as I turn around from saying that, I see Arlo running down the hill with Amos's lifeless body. And I went into shock. I didn't know what I was actually looking at. I knew I saw my son and Arlo, and and he was bloody, and I just couldn't talk. Arlo saw me going into shock, and Arlo starts working on Amos, and he's trying to talk to me, and I can't talk to the dispatcher. And he just graciously says, "Please hand me the phone," takes the phone, and starts talking. And then,
And at that point, I had asked Capri to go get my mother, to get Eli. Um, so she jumps in the car, goes down, and brings my mother.
yeah. Well, before that, though, I had a moment where I was in such shock and I didn't know what was actually happening. I walked over to the garden just to kind of cry out to God. I literally cried out. So I was like, "Oh my God, please, what is, just, I don't know what's happening." And at that very moment, it was like, "God, allow me to have this decision. Am I going to trust him with what is happening at this very moment?" And it was just a personal thing for me. But if I knew my son was in heaven with Jesus, the words he spoke to me next were, "I'm coming soon." So that was enough for me to just know that, like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Um, and I literally went into saving mode, and whatever, if there's a silver line, if whatever it is, if we can save him, let's try. That's when he asked me to hop in the car and go down and get mom. And his dad wasn't even home. His dad was in Cabo.
Yeah,
And, I just remember running on the porch and yelling and really screaming, "Help!" Like, she got in the car with me and I couldn't even tell her what was happening because I just said, "It's Amos, it's Amos." And we get up there and she grabs Eli and we just hopped in
So
the car.
we live about 5 miles from where the fire hall where the ambulance was dispatched from, and every second counted. And
Yeah.
so we got in the car, and the phone we were on was a cordless phone. This was a while ago, so we didn't have
Yeah.
cell phones. So
Yeah.
we just hung up with
Yeah.
911, and Capri raced out there.
I
I'm
don't remember
working on
driving.
him the whole time, just trying to work on him. And she races out there, and we get out to the main road, and we're getting it down the main road, heading towards the fire hall. And a police car, his lights on, is heading towards us, and she just jammed her brakes on and just flagged him down.
Yeah.
He pulls a U-turn, and right behind him was an ambulance, and it pulls a U-turn and on the shoulder, and we pull up right behind the ambulance, and right where we pulled over on this phone pole, to this day still, 17 years later, is the word "soon"
Yeah.
written. You can see it on
Yeah.
Google Earth. It's still written on that tongue.
It's just
Um,
the Lord.
so I get out of the car and run up to the ambulance. The doors are wide open. I hand them my baby, and they shut the doors, shoved us out. And that's when, up until that point, it was all just do what you got to do, do what you got to do. And you were doing everything. You weren't thinking about anything but just
Yeah.
CPR, CPR. What can I do? And then I stumbled off to the side of the road. There was a little bit of a knoll there by this ditch. And I stumbled off and just hit me like a ton of bricks. What just happened? I mean, what just happened? Did I just kill my baby? What's gonna happen with my life, my wife? I mean, I just killed her baby. And it just hit me. The reality of just what happened. Just 1 minute, everything was great. It was my birthday. We're gonna go on the boat. Everything was great. Now,
You're in this whole other mode, of your life just changed in an instant, you know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but as he was over just a few feet from me, and of course they took and put Amos in. They wouldn't let me go on the ambulance either. So at that point, I was in the same place of like, what just happened? And I didn't realize what had actually happened until that very moment. But I just fell to my knees and I just really felt the Holy Spirit speaking to my heart: "Get up and go forgive your husband." And I get up, I was obedient and got up and went over and just wrapped my arms around him and was like, "I forgive you because I know he would never harm our children. I know he loves our boys. And I know that this was an accident." It was just, God was just do this. And I was like, okay. And that's the thing is with that forgiveness, you know,
or just when you came over and wrapped your arms around me, I said, "I forgive you." There's such power in forgiveness. There's such a just like, okay, she's gonna be by my side through this. And I'll say 17 years later, it's easy to say I forgive you.
yeah.
But Capri has walked the walk. She talked the talk, but she walked the walk. And I can say to this day, she has forgiven me for so much in our life
Mhm.
and the mistakes I've made. And obviously that was an accident, but she has walked this walk with me and just in true forgiveness has forgiven me. So,
Yeah.
um, so anyhow, at this point, the ambulance had left. And we're sitting on the side of the road. There was the first police officer who had pulled over, and then his, I guess, sergeant or his superior was there as well. And I go up to the superior's like, we need to get to the hospital. You know, why aren't we going to the hospital? Our baby's at the hospital. We need to get to the hospital. And he's like, well, we're waiting for a female officer to take your wife, but you have to come back to where the accident happened. And so I was like, why are we waiting for a female officer?
Yeah.
You know, can this guy take him? He's like, yeah, well, we can
I
take
said it doesn't matter. I need to go now, and we can go together. And so this young officer did take me the fastest I've ever driven there. And I just remember asking him, do you have kids? And he's like, yes. I was like, just go home and love on them. Just go home
Yeah.
and give them big old hugs and kiss them. And as we get to the hospital, of course, everything's just feels surreal. It just, so you walk in the door, I'm by myself, I'm barefooted. I have blood on me. I just remember them escorting me back to what I call the room. And there was a counselor sitting in there, and it was kind of dark. I just remember it being kind of dark anyway. And I just remember looking at her and be like, are you a believer? And she's like, yes. And I said, let's pray. And I just start praying. Just one, I've been praying the whole time
Yeah.
for the Lord to save Amos's
Yeah.
life. But I also was coming into this surrender of like, what if he really is with Jesus? And as I'm sitting there, and it had been some time, I feel like forever. We're sitting there, and a doctor enters the room, and there's maybe a couple of nurses with her, and she's this little itty bitty woman, and she just looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could to save his life." And I hadn't cried up until this moment because of the shock.
Yeah.
Um, but the floodgates just opened, and I just wrapped my arms around her and just gave her a big old hug. And just shortly after that, my mom and dad came in, and they had just come from a church picnic. And I just said, Amos is with Jesus. Amos is with Jesus. And Arlo wasn't there yet. Um, so anyway, as
Yeah.
you get there,
So let's back up to where I was at the scene, where the ambulance left and Capri had left. The officer took me back to our house. And so I get back to our house, and there's another deputy there, a very young deputy there, and my twin brother was there. And he says, that deputy's here to keep you from hurting yourself.
Oh.
yeah,
And evidently that's a reality.
Oh.
But I just felt the Holy Spirit come upon me and say, go talk to this guy. And I went up to him, and he was like literally just chain smoking. I mean, he was just dragging. He was just ashen. He didn't know what to do.
Okay.
He was a young guy in his early 20s. And I just went up to him and said, look, I'm not going to hurt myself. I said, I don't know why this happened. I said, but God has a great purpose in this. And I mean, I'm covered in blood. I looked ugly. And so I was like, is there any way I can go and change? And he's like, no, you can't go in the house. And my brother went over and talked to the superior, the sergeant or lieutenant, whatever he was, and he's like, no, he can go change. So he let me go change, and I come out. I was like, I have to be I have to be with my wife. I have to be with my baby. Can we go to the hospital? So we're waiting for the detectives to get here. It's going to be a little bit. I just begged and pleaded with him. He's like, just show me where the accident happened, and I'll take you. So I showed him where the accident happened, and we drove to the hospital. And it was the longest ride of my life. We weren't speeding at all, and that's when it hit me. There's no reason to speed. There's no reason to be in a hurry. My boy didn't make it. So I kind of already knew before I got there that that would be the case. And so I get to the hospital, and Capri meets me in the hallway. And she comes up and she tells me that Amos is in heaven. So we get to go back to this room where they had Amos, and at the church picnic, the pastor came, the assistant pastor from that church came, and it was one of those things. I just was, holding Amos for the last time, and I was just felt the Holy Spirit just speaking through me to those pastors. And I to this day I can't tell you exactly what I said, but I just felt the movement of the Holy Spirit. And talking with these people later in life, it showed me, told me and revealed to me some of those things, that God was speaking to their hearts in that room.
Yeah.
And that was just the start of it. And then we, of course, we had to leave Amos at the hospital. And then
So hard, right?
Yes.
Like, how do you go
Yes.
from getting ready to go and enjoy your day to leaving your child in a hospital? It's hard to shift gears,
And then as bereaved parents, you do the next thing you do is now tomorrow you're at the funeral home. Starting to make arrangements and plans.
right?
I mean, what a difference a day makes. Everything was so different. The trajectory of life, everything was so different. And then this bomb went off in your lap. And now everything is just shifted. Now you're planning a memorial service and a funeral, all that goes into that process. And we were young and didn't even I never thought about those things.
Right.
And so we weren't prepared for that. But God went before us and ordained all of it. And we had a beautiful memorial service, and it was just filled to capacity. Plus, it was 700 some people there. We got cards and letters from all over the world, Africa, and China, Korea. It's like, how did this 18-month-old baby touch people around the world? And it's just the news of our story spread so quickly, I guess, just that we were getting. And so I guess God was
for us and just being loving on us.
and just lifting us up in prayer. You could feel the supernatural just prayer from people all over the world lifting us up in prayer. It was just like, it was amazing to me to see what God was already doing with Amos's story in just the moments after his death. And so we planned the memorial, so did it, and after it, we just needed to get away and have a respite, a time to get away. And we love the water, we love the beach, and so we just ran down to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, just no plan, just go. And God just made it a wonderful, wonderful trip for us. And He kind of planted these seeds in my heart there. I remember out on the beach that day, just wouldn't it be nice to have a place where people could come and just share in their grief and just share in that experience, but have a place where they could just feel safe and just be away from everything by the water. And so that was the start of the seeds God planted in my heart to do retreats for parents and to start doing that.
He also gave us that verse, 2 Corinthians 1:3-5. And
Blessed be to the Father of comfort, who comforts us in our troubles or afflictions, so that we may be able to comfort others with the comfort He's given us.
so when that verse was brought to our attention, it was kind of like, how could we do that right now?
Yeah.
The verse is irrelevant. We need those people. Where are they?
Yeah.
And so we went back home, back to our reality, and just felt God, it wasn't time yet for that. But we didn't have any resources at all. There was no grief share back then.
Yeah, it was very limited, especially for just bereaved parents. It was
there really wasn't. And we ended up, for me, I really had to spend a lot of quiet time with God. And I was so blessed to have a job where I could receive a paycheck and not have to go to work for a while. And so that afforded me the opportunity to go and just spend quiet time with God. We live near this river, and I would just go up there and take this little boat up and just turn the motor off and drift down, and just in a place where there's nobody around, and I could yell at God. I could scream at God. I could argue
It's personal.
with God. I could get rebuked by God. And it was just, a place where he can take it. When you have, He can take your anger. He can take that. And really just spending a lot of time with Him. And I really dug deep into Job. That's where I just lived. And a lot of people have a hard time with Job, but it really, really showed me the sovereignty of God. And that God is, as much as this world can seem in chaos and these things, these tragedies in life make no sense, it might not have been God's perfect will, but God is sovereign in it, and God can redeem it, and God can give us great purpose in these tragedies. And, He revealed to me at the end of Job, it ended beautifully. And I think that's what we hold on to is the ending. How are we going to live well until we're reunited with our children again? And that's how we want to live this walk. Are we perfect at it? Far from it. We're just fallen.
We're broken.
like everybody else.
Broken people.
But we really, I over time, I felt God. It's like, I'm ready, God. I'm ready to do this. Let's do this. And he's like, you're not ready. You know?
Be still. Just be still.
And it
Yeah.
was frustrating. Waiting is hard. Especially when you feel God's given you this. Okay, this is your desire. I want you to do this.
Yeah.
So that was a hard thing waiting. And we had been watching. Capri had been watching while we're waiting.
But we just kind of were trying to get a sense of what's out there.
Mhm.
And, again, that retreat was, those little seeds were planted in his heart. And of course, my heart too. But, I just kind of was looking on the internet, different things, what's out there.
Yeah.
So it was actually, just within 12 years of Amos Running to Heaven, there was so much more as far as resources go. And I saw a few different places and I thought, let's go, we need to go to one of these just to see what the blueprint looks like.
Yeah.
And I'd searched some different places and then I'd come across, it was Jill and Brad's, while we're waiting. And I thought, oh, this place looks really cool, and I love that they're honoring the Lord. And that was something that we wanted to do with this.
No, I just kept, it's not ready. It's not ready. And fast forward to about 2018, we really felt God say, okay, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we started looking again, we wanted to sign up for a retreat with this ministry that we've been watching called While We're Waiting. And not to be a part of it, but just to see how you do this. How do you host retreats?
Right.
What's involved?
Because we had been, we had bases to start doing retreats. Because again, we didn't know what exactly it would look like. We just knew it involved bereaved people. And so therefore, the idea of what they were doing made so much sense. And we had no idea. You go ahead and tell the story.
So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, see how they do it. And so we had looked in 2018, August of 2018, Capri got on the While We're Waiting website to sign up for a retreat. At that time, there were 2 retreat locations. There was one in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and there was one that just started in Oregon. And they had already done one retreat. And there was a waiting list for a year to get into their Hot Springs, Arkansas location. And Oregon had availability in April of 2019. And I've been blessed to be able to travel around the country, and Oregon was one of my favorite states. And Capri had never been there, and I'd never been to Arkansas, had never a reason to go to Arkansas. So I was like, let's go to Oregon. So this would have been probably November 5th or 4th. I got an email from the director while we're waiting saying, I know this is last minute. I know it's all the way across the country, but we have a cancellation in Oregon this weekend. It was actually November 9th, which is Amos's birthday. And so we're there,
Yes, get those tickets.
And we were very front. And we were very upfront with them. We were very, that we want to do retreats.
We had put that in, we had put that in our application. Just, this is something we're thinking about doing on the East Coast. And that was it.
And so we met the couple hosting out there, wonderful Christian couple, Matt and Stacy Zachary. And they kind of were talking to us about the idea of hosting retreats ourselves and really kind of thought, that we would be a better fit in the While We're Waiting ministry. And we would much rather be part of this than start our own.
Yes.
And so
how many years into this was
this?
12 years.
12 years. It was 12 years after Amos died that
you were good and ready.
Yeah, God. But you know what, Todd? Waiting on God's timing is difficult, but waiting His timing is so much better than we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And so the reward for that patience and waiting is that we got to come back here and we got to meet the founders of the ministry and really pray about it. And they prayed about it and really felt that God was leading them to open a ministry, a retreat center on the East Coast. So now we have one on the West Coast and on the East Coast. And they said, go find a place and we'll take care of it. And God just provides amazing ways when we wait on Him and His timing. We could have tried to do it our way in our time, but it's so much better if we wait on His timing and do it in His timing. And so that's what God has done with our tragedy and our story. Now that we host retreats for this ministry and we get to do 4 or 5 retreats a year, and it's just such a blessing to us to meet new bereaved parents and to be able just to co-labor with them and suffer along and help them down that road of grief. Just that you can have joy. You can have beauty from ashes in your life. And I was actually flying here I was speaking with somebody who had lost, there was some child loss in their family, and I was trying to describe to them what it was like to experience child loss. And the analogy I like to use, it's like when you're watching a movie and a bomb goes off and your ears are ringing and there's just a cloud of dust and you're just gasping for air, can't even breathe, and you're just crawling out of this crater, just gasping for air. And eventually, as you come out of that crater, the ringing in your ears starts to subside. The dust starts to clear. You're still stumbling through. You're still just trying to gasp for air, and eventually you can start to breathe a little better. And you start to get up and upright and start walking through this road of grief. And that's the best analogy I can explain to parents of what it's like, that have never experienced this. Of course, nobody would ever want, not even your worst enemy, to have to
Right.
go through
Yeah.
this
None of us
this
want.
kind of tragedy. But that's an analogy I like to use to help people understand it is such a devastating, life-changing experience for any parent who's lost a child, no matter what circumstances. It's just like this bomb went off in your life. All of a sudden, you're going down this road and you're planning this trajectory, and this bomb just put a
Yeah.
big crater in your path, and you can't go down that road anymore. You have to take a new detour and a new.
Yeah.
I know a lot of parents will want to try to avoid that, so they decide we're gonna expunge anything of that child out of their life. They're not going to talk about that child, and so they're trying to avoid it without going down that road. Have you seen that in?
And it can be, I have, and one of the things we encourage people is, with grief, you have to deal with it now,
Yep.
or you can have to deal with it later.
Yep.
You can't, you can put it off, but you have to process through it. And I encourage people, it's easier to process that now in the beginning than to try to push it away and shove it down. And not, I think it's healthier for us to let that out and get that out.
So what was that road like for you, the grief road? Because you guys are 17 years out. Most people watching this documentary probably are much closer than they are to the death of their child than where you guys are. So sort of if you can, paint a picture of that road so that we can have some hope to know what we can expect as we move forward.
Walking that road in the first few years was very difficult for us. Everybody's walk is going to be different. It's not a race. We're all going to walk at a different pace, and depending our tragedies, our skill sets, our life experiences. I was emotionally illiterate. I was blessed with a wonderful life, and I just didn't have a lot to draw from emotionally. So for me, it was a process of really just understanding and processing and work through those emotions. Especially those first few years, I think I was gasping for air. That cloud of dust was over us for a while. But as I walked through that road and continued down it, that gray cleared out. As sometimes we'd say in the ministry, color came back. And part of that, I try to encourage people to have a lot of grace on yourself and your spouse. We're going to grieve so differently. Men and women grieve differently. And I think it's not fair to put those expectations on each other to grieve the way that we're grieving.
Right.
So that would be the first thing I would encourage, is that grace. Have grace on each other. Have grace that you're going to process and work through this differently. And, men tend to do it completely different than women, and I think culturally, there's some problems there that we just culturally aren't equipped the way we probably should to process that. But getting down that road, just like anything we walk through in life, it's going to take time. And I think we have to be intentful, like you're saying about people just shoving it and not doing it. I think we have to unpack it and be intentful as we walk through it. And it's just like sometimes climbing a sand dune. Sometimes it's 2 steps up, 1 step back. That's
a good
grief.
analogy.
And that's part of it, and that's part of where that grace comes in. It's just don't put these expectations. Of course, we always encourage people not to make drastic decisions in that first year of grief, because we make these knee-jerk big decisions, and we're not in a state of mind that probably should be making those kind of decisions. But as you walk down that road, some people can walk quicker than others and at a different pace than others. I think it really encourages you to get with good Christian people that can co-labor, help you down that road. And then that, I have a good analogy I like to use that I learned from somebody. And grief in the immediacy of it is like this giant boulder. It's so heavy, you can only barely get it off the ground. You can't even see over it. It's so just dragging you and weighing you down. And as you walk down this road of grief, that boulder gets a little smaller and you can start to see around it. You can pick it up off the ground. You can move a little faster now. And as we're walking down, it gets a little smaller and it's a little more maneuverable. Eventually it gets to the size we can put it in one of those front baby carriers. Right now we can use our hands, right? We can walk, but it's right there. It's still heavy, still weighing us down right in front of us. And as we continue down this road of grief, we can take that boulder and stick it in our backpack. And now it's not right in front of us. It's still weighing us down. It's still heavy, but we still have that mobility. It's not right in front of us. And eventually we can take it out of that backpack and put it in our pocket. It's always going to be with us. We can pull it out. It's there. We can feel it. But it's not as heavy. It's not all encompassing. It's not that heavy, heavy burden. But it's always going to be with us. But it's more portable, I guess. Easier to carry. That grief is an easier burden to carry at that point. Now it's all happens at a different pace for all of us. But eventually that boulder shrinks to that little stone. And that's the analogy I like to give people of what that journey of grief is like. And especially, like you said, when it's so fresh, it's like, I can't imagine being able to put that into my backpack, let alone in my pocket.
We felt that. Right.
But down that road, you'll be able to put it in your pocket. You will. But the sooner you deal with it, the sooner you can put it in your pocket.
That's right.
If you don't deal with it, it's that
You're
heavy.
delaying it and you're carrying that burden and you shouldn't be carrying it.
Can you define, give a little more layers and explanation to how, when you say if you deal with it? Was it pictures? Was it looking at pictures? Was it scripture? Was it journaling? Or what helps to deal with it?
Do you want to take that one?
I actually did journal. I journaled pretty detailed, and it was more like me just in prayer. It was more prayers than what I was actually experiencing. It was just so personal with the Lord, where he got to go out on the river. That was my go-to. And so I probably did 3 journals throughout a couple of years, just thick journals. But I don't do that as much anymore because, again, I've got it in my pocket, but that was really helpful for me. And being in the Word. The Bible I had at that time literally has fallen apart because it was so important for me. It was like night and day. I had to be in the Word. I would take index cards and put them in my kitchen of verses to remind me of his promises and what's to come, and that's kind of how I did that. We were blessed to be in a wonderful Bible study at the time. So that was very encouraging.
In the immediacy, God brought some people right around us that were there every day, just good, godly people that were grounded in scripture that could help, because we mentally couldn't. We couldn't even open that. It's like, but God brought those people beside us. And, part of dealing with it, and when I said it that way, is just not avoiding it, and not bearing it. As men, we tend to do that. We tend to get busy, and jump. And in hindsight, there's lots of mistakes I made, and that was one of them. Right after, about a year and a half after, I got very heavily involved with work to a point that wasn't probably healthy. And that's kind of, instead of working through that, in hindsight, I could see that was really a bad mistake on my part. But I think it's fairly normal from what I've seen for men to tend to just get distracted by work and other things, and we kind of just push it aside and we don't deal with it. So I guess part of that is being intentful not to do that kind of thing.
Something I think that we should touch base on is that we recognize that this was spiritual warfare. That was the huge thing for us, is recognizing our enemy and those fiery darts. Our son used to call them those fiery darnets. But recognizing those lies that he's going to throw at you. If you can imagine with our situation, the lies the enemy would throw at me, and I know him. But again, that word was protecting us, and literally you did have to armor up, and you guys understand that. That's the thing, is that it is such a spiritual, because the enemy doesn't want to see us find that hope. He doesn't want us to even share it with others when we do find that,
He wants us to be bitter and angry with God. He wants us to be there.
And he wants us to be consumed by that grief. And we can get stuck there, if we don't get into that word. If we continue to trust him, he starts revealing to us, his perfect plan, you know?
And one of the things that, you know, I was very blessed to have a Bible study teacher that taught me this before Amos died, that guilt will never come from God.
Mm.
And I'm so glad I knew that, because I could have easily gone down that road of guilt. What we call the woulda, shoulda, couldas. Oh, I could have done this different, should have done that. Well, that's not going to change the outcome. But that's what the enemy wants to pull you in and suck it. Well, you should have done that. You could. Why did you do that? Why didn't you go out and look? And why did you do that? So many things that. But I'm so glad that the Holy Spirit didn't even allow me to go down that road. And only I can say, only supernaturally, that I didn't go down that road, because there's nothing that's going to change the outcome. The reality is, Amos is with the best babysitter ever. He's living in perfection.
Yes.
And there's no more pain. There's no more sorry. He doesn't have to live in this fallen world.
Right.
And I get to live with him forever.
Yeah.
And so how am I going to live now until I'm reunited with him? And one of the things I say is, I want to hear Amos to hear Jesus tell me, well done, good and faithful servant. And that's something that, I miss the mark every day.
Yeah.
I'm a fallen sinner just like everybody else in this world, but that is my strive. That is my goal.
Yeah. And you're running that race.
Yeah,
right?
we want to run it well.
Yeah.
But the enemy wants to destroy and take that from us. He wants to destroy that testimony.
Yeah.
And, for me, I definitely was dealing with a lot of PTSD from it.
Yeah.
And it was a frustration for me. And back then, there really wasn't as prevalent or talked about as much as it is now.
The tools weren't really offered to bereaved parents back then. It was more like military.
Yes.
It was just it wasn't as commonly talked about. Obviously, we've been dealing with it forever, but it wasn't. So for me, I felt to be effective and used in the ministry, it was difficult, because I can't even talk about Amos without just bawling. We were invited by that church that the pastors came to the hospital room for the next Memorial Day, for Memorial Day service. Yeah, I'll do that. Sure.
We got this.
We get up, and I'm very comfortable public speaking and talking with people. I love doing it, and I get up on stage. They hand me the microphone. Capri's right next to me, and I just I was like,
It's the microphone. I'm like, sorry, we can't do this today. But they were so gracious.
And so I knew I had to deal with this to be used. And so for a long time, I was like, God, how can you use me with this injury, this thing I'm dealing with?
And as his wife, I just felt the Lord was like, you got to remind him that there's great purpose in this. This is a powerful testimony. Don't let the enemy steal this from you guys.
So eventually, about 5 years in, I was really feeling, I want to do this. I go, God, I'm ready to do this. And he was like, you're not. It's like, okay, and so I did seek out Christian counseling, and I saw a Christian counselor twice, and he was like, Arlo, there's nothing I can do to help you. This is perfectly normal.
Right.
There's okay to cry. It's okay to have those tears. And now I embrace that PTSD 17 years later, because that's a piece of that day, that experience. I don't want to be healed from it. That quiver in my voice, that shake in my voice, it's part of that day. I don't need to be fixed from it. It only helps, tell that story.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
And so God showed me, hey, this is fine. This is okay. I want you to be broken.
Yeah.
I want to use broken people.
Yeah.
And so, and as we went down that journey, those are little things God did to prepare us. And I would tell people now, being in this walk for so long, there's resources out there.
Right.
There's support groups. There's good Christian groups. Find yourself a good Christian support group. Find yourself something you can get plugged in with. There's online resources. There's just get in and understand you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
You're not. You might feel alone in this, that nobody understands or gets it, but unfortunately, you're not alone in this. And there's other people that are going through that. And if we can just get together and help understand that you're not alone.
Yeah. Because our tendency is to isolate.
Yes.
Right.
And there may be someone watching this right now that is just in their home isolating, and the first step they've taken is to push play on your video. And just doing that as a step, being willing to think about it. talk about it, and hearing how much not isolating helped you guys.
Right. Yeah.
Another analogy God gave me was like, we're all in a horrible storm in a shipwreck. We're all scattered out in our lifeboats in this raging sea.
Mm.
And you feel all alone in the dark. Nobody around you. You're just helpless and alone. We just pull our lifeboats together and hold on.
Yeah.
And then point to shore. And Jesus, that lighthouse,
Yeah.
that light, that beacon of hope that we're going to navigate to. But if we can just grab our lifeboats and realize that we're not alone in this, and we're going to get through this storm together.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's just an analogy God gave me. I just loved it, that picture of it.
It was a
Right.
great picture. I think it's a great picture for churches and for pastors to recognize
Mm.
those people who've lost their child, they're alone, they're isolated, and they're going to stay that way unless there is an intentionality
Yes.
in going
Yes.
out and being walking alongside them, being with
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that somebody told us early on was that, like you said, Arlo, that we can't depend upon each other for our grief. We're going to grieve differently.
Mhm.
So if we are depending upon each other, that's going to create conflict, you know? And so you have to make a decision. Who are you going to go to when you're grieving? Like, I will have a friend I go to. She's got a friend that she goes to
Mhm.
because we know we're not going to be able to
Yeah.
help each other.
No, that's great
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
Although I would say he's the only one that understands to the depth of his soul the way I feel.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's the one
Yes.
that I grab.
Right. There's
Right.
a part of our grief that is shared and nobody else can
That's
grieve
right.
with
Yeah.
us in that.
Yeah.
But it's such
We
a
get
big
that.
dimensional thing. We need somebody else to go to because there were times where you were wanting me to do something and I was wanting you to do something and you couldn't.
Right. Right. We've been there.
And hey, expectations can lead to disappointment,
That's-
right? You know?
When you're grieving and you're like a skillet, like she always says, she's a hot skillet and you throw water on it, it's gonna sizzle.
Right. Right.
Stay away from that hot skillet.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how even today, our losses are so different. Our son was a teenager. Your son was young. Our son was suicide. Yours was an accident. Yours was years out. Ours is 3 years out. But God gave me an answer with you that I have been looking for a long time. And it was the grief journey, because it is in my pocket right now. And I did not know how to describe that.
Right.
I'm going through, am I dishonoring Tristan by feeling okay?
Wait a minute, it's in your pocket?
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
No,
It's okay. It's okay. That is okay,
How
right?
did you get it in your pocket? I want to know.
He's different. I was going to touch on that too, that having expectations of your spouse, at the time, I had the luxury of time to journal and journal. And I would go to my Bible every day and be in it until God gave me something. And so I was doing that on a regular basis. He was too, but I didn't see that early in the morning. And then he had a full-time job.
Right.
So he happened to be working on a project that required overtime. But I knew I had been taught that people grieve differently.
Right.
So I allowed him his grief journey while I pursued mine. And I could easily see it have turned into a wife saying, my husband doesn't even care. He isn't even grieving. But thank the Lord, I had been through class that had taught me
Yeah.
they're going to grieve differently. So I gave him that space. And eventually, I'm at the place with, in my pocket, and he is not. So I have more to give to him
Yeah.
because I'm not in such a deep, deep need.
Yeah.
So God allowed that.
She's been one of my biggest counselors, telling me when I go to her, I'm like, I don't know why I'm so exhausted, why I just want to go to sleep,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not grieving. It's not like that's the weird thing about grief. You're not intentionally thinking
No.
about the
Right,
grief where it's
right.
coming, but your body is responding
Yes.
to things.
Yes, it's
And you're not
physically
capable of
exhausting.
doing the things. And you just don't know that. You're not aware of that. And I can't read and comprehend things. So it's been a long time since I've been able to sit and read something that's a little heavy now. And it really frustrates me because I used to read a lot. And I'm like, why can't I? What's the grief?
Yeah.
No, and people don't understand it physically changes us.
Yeah.
It absolutely physically changes us. Our mental, physically changes our brain. Brain is a real thing, but physically changes our
Yeah.
bodies, the stress on our bodies. Grief can take a real toll on
And
us.
they say that it's in contrast to having a traumatic brain injury. And it's just like, well, yeah, your brain is changed from that trauma,